Hey there, what's going on? Before we dive into this one, I need you to do me a quick favor. Find that subscribe button and hit it, then make sure you turn on notifications. Because the story I'm about to tell you, it's the kind that changes how you see the world. It's about to get real fast. Look, honey, the welfare line is back at the terminal. This section is for people who buy tickets, not hope for handouts. The words, dripping with a venomous sweetness, were a deliberate performance. Tiffany Miller, a flight attendant whose polished veneer was thinner than an airplane window, stood over the woman in seat 2A. Her posture was an act of aggression, a peacock fanning its feathers in a clear display of dominance. In the hushed, pressurized air of the first-class cabin, her voice wasn't just loud. It was a weapon, sharp and designed to cut. Every single passenger within earshot froze. A businessman in 1C instinctively paused the spreadsheet on his laptop. An elderly couple in 1D stopped their hushed conversation mid-sentence. They all turned, a collective sea of curious, judgmental, and expectant faces. The target of Tiffany's attack, a stunning black woman of about 35, didn't flinch. She slowly looked up from the tablet resting in her lap, her dark eyes calm, unblinking, and carrying a depth that seemed to absorb the flight attendant's hostility without reflection. Her suit was simple, a perfectly tailored charcoal blazer, but the quiet confidence with which she wore it screamed more loudly than any designer logo. "I have a first-class ticket," Dr. Imani Vance replied. Her voice was the opposite of Tiffany's. It was soft, measured, a calm lake next to a raging fire. She made a move to reach into her blazer pocket. Like a predator striking, Tiffany snatched the boarding pass from Imani's hand before it was even fully extended. She held it up, examining it with a theatrical disbelief, angling it towards the light as if expecting the text to dissolve. Then, with a flick of her wrist, she didn't hand it back. She slapped it against Imani's chest. The stiff cardstock made a sharp crack, a sound that echoed through the stunned silence of the cabin like a starter pistol. "Nice try, sweetie. Don't think you can scam your way into a $10,000 seat. We've seen it all before," Tiffany said, her voice rising in pitch, projecting now to the rest of the cabin, making them all participants in the humiliation. Other passengers began to lean in, the subtle rustle of clothing and craning of necks filling the space. Imani adjusted her blazer, a smooth, unhurried motion. As her hand moved, the sleeve pulled back just an inch, revealing a watch. It wasn't flashy, but to the few who knew, the watch was a Patek Philippe, a piece of quiet craftsmanship that cost more than the car Tiffany probably drove to work. Imani remained seated, a statue of composure in a sea of escalating chaos. Have you ever been in a room where everyone is looking at you, but nobody actually sees you? They see a projection, a stereotype, a ghost conjured from their own prejudices. They see anything and everything except the power sitting right in front of them. Let me know in the comments if you've ever felt that erasure, that profound underestimation. It's a feeling that can either break you or forge you into steel. 10 minutes until takeoff. The clock was ticking, a metronome counting down to a confrontation that would alter the course of an entire airline. Imani extended her boarding pass again. "I assure you, I have a first-class ticket," she repeated, her voice unwavering. This time, Tiffany didn't just take it. She snatched it like a border guard confiscating a forged passport. She turned to the cabin, playing to her audience. "You guys, you're not going to believe this. We've got another one trying to get a free upgrade into first class." The businessman in 1C, a man named Chad, whose tie was too tight and whose sense of entitlement was too large, immediately saw his opportunity. He pulled out his phone, his thumb hovering over the record button. Viral content was currency, and a live takedown of an entitled black woman was pure gold. The elderly white woman in 1D, Eleanor, leaned over to her husband and whispered, her voice a stage whisper meant to be overheard. "It's always the same story with them. Always trying to get something for nothing." Tiffany saw Chad's phone. A smirk played on her lips. She flipped her own phone to selfie mode, her face perfectly framed, and with a practiced tap, she started a live stream. "Hey, Tiff's Jet Set crew, it's your girl Tiffany, coming at you live from Stratus Air Flight 714 to JFK. We've got a little bit of drama up here in the fancy seats. This woman seems to think the seating chart is just a suggestion. We'll see what security has to say about that." Her viewer count began to climb with dizzying speed. 23, 47, 89. 152 people watching in real time as a woman's dignity was stripped away for entertainment. The chat filled with laughing emojis and comments that were far, far worse. "Security to gate B12, Tiffany announced into her headset, her eyes locked on Imani, a cruel smile playing on her lips. "We have a passenger in a premium cabin refusing to move to her assigned seat in coach." Imani remained motionless, an island of calm. She reached for her wallet. As she did, a card glinted under the cabin lights. It was black, made of anodized metal, unmistakable to anyone who mattered in the world of finance. It was an American Express Centurion card, the black card. Chad, the businessman, scoffed loudly enough for everyone to hear. "Probably a fake," he muttered to his seatmate. "Or stolen. You can buy knockoffs online now." Imani's phone buzzed, a soft, discreet vibration. She answered it with a quiet, "Yes." Her voice remained level. "Tell the board I'll be 20 minutes late. We're dealing with an operational delay." Tiffany rolled her eyes dramatically for her live audience, now numbering over 200. "Oh, listen to her! Tell the board." "The board of what, Burger King? Honey, the only meeting you're going to is with the Port Authority Police." The chat feed on Tiffany's screen exploded. "Lololol board meeting. Drag her off the plane, Tiff. She's probably got a record." A young Latina woman in seat 3B, a venture capital analyst named Sophia, shifted uncomfortably in her seat. She looked from Tiffany's performative cruelty to Imani's impossible calm. She'd been on the receiving end of looks like the ones Imani was getting. The suspicion, the dismissal. It was a familiar, bitter taste. But she stayed silent. Fear was a powerful sedative. Heavy, purposeful footsteps echoed up the jet bridge. The atmosphere in the cabin shifted, the tension ratcheting up another notch. 2 airport security officers boarded, their large frames and tactical vests filling the narrow first-class aisle, instantly making the luxurious space feel cramped and carceral. Officer Davies, the senior of the two, didn't even bother to glance at Imani. His eyes went straight to the uniform, straight to Tiffany. He was a man who followed a script, and in his experience, the flight attendant was always the reliable narrator. "What's the situation, Tiffany?" "This passenger is in a seat she didn't pay for, sir." Tiffany's voice was now imbued with the practiced authority of someone who knew her words carried weight. "She's refusing to move to her seat back in coach where she belongs. She's delaying the entire flight." Only then did Officer Davies finally look at Imani. She sat perfectly still, her designer handbag in her lap. It was a Hermes Birkin, a bag that was not only incredibly expensive, but notoriously difficult to acquire, often with a years-long waiting list. It cost more than Officer Davies made in a year. He saw the bag, processed it through his internal filter of assumptions, and immediately concluded it had to be a convincing fake. "Ma'am," he said, his voice flat, devoid of politeness, "we're going to need you to gather your personal belongings and come with us. 8 minutes until takeoff." Imani's fingers, steady and deliberate, moved across her phone's screen. She sent 3 quick, encrypted messages. The recipients were labeled simply in her contacts. Marcus G., COO. Eliza C., General Counsel. Benjamin Reed, Personal. 3 messages sent. 3 digital missiles launched into the corporate world, their payloads set to detonate on command. Chad was now openly recording, holding his phone up high to capture the perfect angle of the confrontation. "This, folks, is what entitlement looks like," he narrated for his own social media followers. "Trying to take a first-class seat you didn't pay for, and then playing the victim when you get called out. Classic." His video, tagged with Thorntrick first-class fraud and Poultry Stratus Air drama, went live on X. Within minutes, it had 47 retweets and was climbing. The algorithm was feasting. A second flight attendant from the coach cabin peeked his head through the curtain. "Need some backup, Tiff?" "Nah, Davies and Chen have it handled. But thanks, girl." Tiffany winked at her live stream. The viewer count ticked past 250. This was going better than she could have imagined. Suddenly, a voice cut through the tension from row 4. "Excuse me, this doesn't seem right at all. I saw the lady's boarding pass when she came on." It was a middle-aged black man, a professor of ethics, as it happened. He was halfway out of his seat. "Sir, please remain seated for your own safety," Officer Chen warned, his hand moving instinctively toward his belt. The threat was unspoken but clear. Eleanor, the elderly woman from 1D, turned completely around in her seat, her face a mask of condescending concern. "Oh, honey, don't get involved," she said to the professor. "She's obviously just trying to scam her way up here. We've all seen their tricks before." The cabin was now a courtroom. Sides were being chosen. The air was thick with prejudice and silent judgment. A young white woman in 2C looked deeply uncomfortable, her eyes darting between Imani and Tiffany, but she hugged her travel pillow tighter and said nothing. Silence was a form of consent. Chad's seatmate nodded approvingly. "It's about time someone did something about this. They think the rules don't apply to them." "Ma'am." Officer Davies stepped closer, invading Imani's personal space. His voice was sterner now. "We need to resolve this quickly. This plane has a schedule to keep. Let's go." Imani looked up at him. That same unnerving calm was still there, an expression as placid as deep water. "I am waiting," she said, her voice clear and carrying through the cabin, "for the captain to be briefed on this situation and review it personally." Tiffany's live stream chat exploded. "She wants the captain now?" "LMAO, make her show a credit card receipt. Kick her off. Why do they always play the victim card?" "Girl, the captain is busy flying the plane," Tiffany snapped, her patience finally fraying. "He doesn't have time for your little games. Security, please escort her off this aircraft so these paying customers can get to New York." Eleanor nodded sagely. "Finally, someone with some sense." Officer Davies reached for the radio on his shoulder. "Ground control, this is Security Unit 4. We may need a gate return for passenger removal. Stand by." 6 minutes until takeoff. The point of no return was approaching fast. That's when a new figure appeared at the open aircraft door. He was a man in his late 40s. His Stratus Air senior manager uniform was impeccably pressed, and he held a tablet like a shield. He radiated an aura of beleaguered authority. This was Derek Jenkins, the senior flight manager. Tiffany's eyes widened. She quickly minimized her live stream app, but didn't end the broadcast. The audio was still live. "What's the holdup here?" Jenkins asked, his eyes scanning the tense tableau in first class. "Passenger in the wrong seat, sir," Tiffany replied, her voice instantly shifting from sassy social media star to deferential employee. "Refusing to move to coach, holding up departure." Jenkins' gaze landed on Imani. He took in her composed posture, the expensive handbag, the ridiculously calm expression. Something flickered in his eyes. It wasn't recognition. It was calculation. He was running a diagnostic, trying to categorize her. And this woman, she wasn't fitting any of the typical profiles. The troublemakers were usually loud, drunk, or frantic. This was something else entirely. This was quiet. "Ma'am, may I please see your boarding pass and your identification?" His tone was professional, but with an underlying edge of impatience. For the very first time, a small, almost imperceptible smile touched the corners of Imani Vance's lips. "Of course," she said. She produced the boarding pass and her driver's license. Jenkins took them. He examined the documents with a forensic intensity. The boarding pass clearly showed Seat 2A, first class, purchased 4 days ago for 9,750. The ID read Dr. Imani Vance, with an address on a street in Atherton, California, one of the most exclusive and expensive zip codes in the entire United States. But Jenkins had been working for airlines for 20 years. He'd seen all the scams. He'd seen high-quality forgeries that would fool a novice. Rich people, the real ones in his experience, usually telegraphed their wealth. They traveled with assistants, wore flashy jewelry, demanded things. This woman's understated, almost regal confidence seemed off. It felt rehearsed, calculated. "These documents appear to be in order," he said slowly, choosing his words carefully. "However, we have been dealing with a recent surge in sophisticated, high-quality forgeries. I'll need to run a full verification through our central reservation system to be sure." Chad's video on X had now been shared 189 times. The comments were a cesspool of racism and classism. "Why is this taking so long? Drag her off. Typical Stratus Air incompetence. Get it together. If you can't afford it, don't board it." Just then, Marcus, the flight attendant from Coach, rushed forward again from the galley. "Captain Rivera is on the horn. He's asking what the hell the delay is about. The tower is getting impatient." Jenkins pulled out his own tablet, his fingers flying across the screen as he accessed the Stratus Air passenger database. The system confirmed the booking. Dr. Imani Vance, Gold Elite status. But her flight history seemed surprisingly limited for someone who could drop 10 grand on a one-way ticket and carry a bag worth a down payment on a house. "Ma'am," Jenkins said, sensing a weakness, "our records indicate some irregularities with your booking profile. Did you purchase this ticket directly through Stratus Air, or did you use a third-party consolidator?" It was a fishing expedition. He was looking for any inconsistency, any small crack in her story he could use to justify his crew's actions and get this plane moving. Imani's phone buzzed. 3 quick notification previews flashed on the screen, visible for only a second. "Marcus G., legal team is on standby." Eliza C., "All contracts with SA pulled. Awaiting your signal." "Benjamin Reed, the board knows. Call me." The board. She glanced at them, then placed her phone face down on her tray table. The gesture was casual, yet deliberate. "I purchased the ticket directly through your corporate travel portal," she replied, her voice as smooth as polished stone. "Would you like the 6-digit confirmation number?" 4 minutes until takeoff. Sophia, the young Latina VC analyst in 3B, finally found her voice. It was quiet, but it cut through the noise. "Excuse me, sir? I saw her boarding pass when she got on. I saw her scan it at the gate. It absolutely said Seat 2A, first class." The ethics professor in 4C nodded emphatically. "I saw it as well, as clear as day. This is a profound miscarriage of customer service." Jenkins felt the narrative slipping from his grasp. 2 credible witnesses were now contradicting his crew's story. But he had backed Tiffany in front of the entire cabin. To back down now would be to lose face, to admit his team had made a monumental prejudicial error. He doubled down. Suddenly, Captain Rivera's voice crackled over the intercom, sharp and laced with military precision. Flight crew, I need an immediate and final resolution on this passenger issue, or I'm handing our departure slot over to United. We are holding up traffic all the way back to the terminal. 60 seconds. The pressure from the cockpit, the tower, the passengers, and his own pride was immense. Jenkins made the choice that would define and ultimately end his career. "Ma'am," he announced, his voice booming with false authority, "given the persistent irregularities and the critical flight delay you are causing, I am officially asking you to deplane for additional identity verification. We can rebook you on the next available flight once this is all sorted out." That's when Imani Vance reached back into her charcoal blazer with the same deliberate, unhurried grace she had shown from the beginning. What she pulled out was not a document. It was not a weapon. But in the context of this moment, it was more powerful than either. And it would change everything. 3 minutes until takeoff. The object Imani pulled from her blazer was a slim, unassuming business card holder crafted from black carbon fiber. With a flick of her thumb, she slid a single card out. She didn't offer it to anyone. Instead, she placed it face down on her tray table, resting the fingertips of her right hand gently on top of it, a gesture that was both a shield and a warning. "Mr. Jenkins," she said, her voice dropping a register, now imbued with an undeniable and chilling authority. "Before you make a decision that will have irreversible consequences for your career and your company, I strongly suggest you summon Captain Rivera to this cabin. Personally." Jenkins bristled, his face flushing with anger. "Ma'am, I have full and complete authority in this cabin. The captain has delegated all passenger-related issues to senior management, which is me." "I understand that," Imani replied, her eyes unblinking. "However, I can assure you, this is a decision that requires the captain's direct and immediate attention." Officer Davies stepped forward again, his patience gone. "Ma'am, the time for talking is over. We need you to gather your things, now." Tiffany's live stream, which she had surreptitiously reactivated, had climbed to a staggering 487 viewers. She held the phone low, whispering a running commentary to her rapt audience. "Okay, y'all, now she's stalling, trying to come up with another lie. What's on the card, you think? Probably says she's the Queen of England, LOL." Chad's video had now broken containment, spreading beyond his personal network and into aviation forums. First-class fraud was trending locally for San Francisco International Airport. The comments were pouring in, a deluge of digital vitriol. "This is taking forever. Just drag her off by her fake Birkin. SFO security is way too soft these days." A third flight attendant, Sarah, emerged from the forward galley, her face etched with stress. "Mr. Jenkins, Captain Rivera is demanding a final status update right now. Ground control is officially threatening to cancel our departure clearance." The pressure was now coming from every conceivable direction. Jenkins looked around the cabin at the sea of recording phones, the frustrated passengers, the immovable woman in 2A. His professional world was shrinking to the space of this one seat. 2 minutes until takeoff. "That is it," Jenkins declared, his voice a theatrical roar meant to reassert his dominance. "Ma'am, you have 10 seconds to comply and deplane voluntarily, or these officers will be authorized to physically assist your removal from this aircraft." Eleanor, the elderly woman, actually clapped her hands together softly. "About time," she murmured. "Someone finally showing some backbone." But her comment was the spark that lit the fuse. The ethics professor in 4C shot to his feet. "Now this has gone far beyond ridiculous," he thundered. "This is harassment, plain and simple. She has a valid ticket. I will testify to that myself." "Sir, sit down immediately, or you will be removed as well," Officer Chen shouted, moving towards him. A palpable wave of tension, thick and suffocating, swept through the entire cabin. This was no longer just about one woman and her seat. It was a schism, dividing the passengers into factions. A middle-aged white man in 3A, a corporate lawyer, suddenly started recording on his own phone. He wasn't recording Imani. He was recording the crew and the security officers. The legal calculus in his head had shifted. He was now documenting a potential lawsuit. "This is getting way out of hand," someone muttered from the back of the cabin. Tiffany's live stream chat was a chaotic waterfall of comments. Her viewer count topped 540. "OMG, this is better than reality TV. Who is this woman? Why won't she just leave?" Imani's phone buzzed again on the tray table. The screen lit up. The caller ID was stark. Legal emergency line. Jenkins saw it, and for the first time, a genuine flutter of doubt, cold and sharp, pierced his arrogant certainty. Normal passengers, even wealthy ones, didn't have emergency legal lines. That was something reserved for people who faced crises on a regular basis. People who had a lot to protect. "Ma'am, this is your final warning," Jenkins barked, trying to regain control. "Remove yourself from this aircraft." It was then that Captain Rivera's voice exploded over the cabin's PA system, not crackling through the intercom, but booming with absolute, commanding power. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking. Due to an unforeseen operational issue, we will be experiencing a brief additional delay. All flight attendants, please pause all departure preparations and stand by." Jenkins froze. His face went slack with confusion. He hadn't requested a pause. He had been trying to expedite the removal to prevent a delay. What was Rivera doing? Sarah, the flight attendant, rushed back from the cockpit area, her expression now one of deep concern. "Sir, the captain has specifically requested to speak with you in the cockpit, immediately." "I can't leave now, Sarah. We're in the middle of a passenger removal." "Sir," Sarah insisted, her voice dropping low, "he said immediately, and he asked specifically about the passenger in seat 2A. The ground shifted beneath Derek Jenkins's feet. How could the captain possibly know about seat 2A specifically? His reports had only mentioned a generic passenger issue. Chad, from his vantage point in 1C, caught the entire panicked exchange on camera. His video was now being picked up by local news aggregators, the share count topping 400. 1 minute past scheduled takeoff time. "Officer Davies, maintain the situation here. I'll be right back," Jenkins said, but all the bluster and confidence had evaporated from his voice. It was thin, wavering. As he scurried toward the cockpit, a man on his way to his own execution, Imani finally lifted her fingers from the business card on her tray table. She didn't flip it over. She simply removed her hand. For a single, fleeting moment, the gold-embossed text on the black card caught the overhead light. Chad in 1C zoomed his camera in, desperate to catch it, but the angle wasn't right. But Sophia, the VC analyst in 3B, had the perfect view. Her eyes widened. Her brain struggled to process the words she was reading. She looked from the card to Imani's calm, serene face, then back to the card. Her jaw fell open. "Oh my God," she whispered, so quietly that only the ethics professor in the row behind her heard. "What? What is it?" he asked urgently. Sophia just shook her head, unable to speak. The name on that card was not just a name. It was a legend in her world of tech and high finance. A ghost, a kingmaker. Tiffany, sensing the sudden shift in atmosphere, noticed the exchange. "What's everyone looking at?" she sneered to her live audience, though a sliver of doubt had begun to creep into her voice. She probably had some fake business card printed up at Kinko's. But her viewers were now the ones asking the questions. "What does the card say? Get closer." "Tiff, get the card!" Officer Davies remained focused on the job. The manager had given him an order. "Ma'am, regardless of whatever is on that card, you still need to comply with crew instructions." "Officer," Imani said, her voice gentle but firm, I truly appreciate your professionalism under these circumstances, but I think you will want to wait for Captain Rivera's assessment of the new information." There was something in her tone. It wasn't arrogance. It wasn't desperation. It was the absolute, unshakable certainty of a person who has already seen the end of the chessboard and knows they are 3 moves from checkmate. 3 minutes past scheduled takeoff. The cockpit door flew open. Jenkins stumbled out, his face ashen, looking as if he'd aged 10 years in 2 minutes. Following him was Captain Javier Rivera, a distinguished man in his late 50s with silver at his temples and the steady gaze of someone who has weathered 3 decades of transatlantic storms and engine failures. The captain's eyes swept the cabin and immediately found Imani in Seat 2A. He stopped dead in his tracks. His professional mask of command dissolved, replaced by a complex cascade of emotions. First concern, then dawning recognition, then utter, undiluted shock, and finally, something that looked terrifyingly like fear. "Everyone, step back from Seat 2A immediately," Captain Rivera commanded. His voice wasn't just authoritative. It was laced with raw panic. Officer Davies was utterly baffled. "Captain, our instructions were to remove this pass—" "Officer, step back, now!" Rivera roared, the force of his command physically pushing both security officers a step back down the aisle. Tiffany's live stream audience was in a state of utter confusion. "WTF is happening? Did you see the captain's face? He looked like he saw a ghost." "This is getting so weird." Chad's camera had captured Captain Rivera's shocked reaction in perfect, high-definition clarity. That specific clip was already being dissected in private pilot forums and airline industry group chats. The name Imani Vance was beginning to be whispered. Captain Rivera approached Imani's seat, moving slowly, carefully, as if approaching royalty, or perhaps a bomb. "Ma'am," he began, his voice barely a whisper. I am so profoundly sorry. There has been a catastrophic misunderstanding." Jenkins stood behind him, looking like a man who had just been told his house had burned down. The cabin had fallen into a tomb-like silence, broken only by the faint hum of the aircraft's auxiliary power unit. Every single phone was still recording. Every passenger was watching, spellbound. Imani looked up at Captain Rivera with those same calm, dark, unreadable eyes. "Captain, I appreciate your intervention, but I'm afraid this situation has escalated far beyond a simple misunderstanding." She gestured with one elegant hand toward the forest of phones aimed at her. "As you can plainly see, this incident has now been documented, extensively." The captain's jaw tightened as his eyes took in the scope of the digital fallout. This wasn't just a passenger complaint anymore. This was a public relations inferno, live-streamed and spreading at the speed of light. "Ma'am, please, accept my personal apology. The full apology of Stratosair. This should never have happened. I'm—" "Captain Rivera," Imani said, her voice soft but carrying the weight of a judge's gavel. "I believe you now know who I am. The real question is, what are you and your airline prepared to do about it?" Her business card still lay on the tray table, face up now. From his angle, the captain could read it clearly. So could Sophia in 3B, who gasped audibly this time. Chad in 1C strained, desperately trying to get his phone to focus on the small, elegant script. His live stream viewers were screaming in the chat. "What does the card say?" "For the love of God, zoom in." Tiffany's bravado finally shattered. Her phone drooped in her hand as the terrifying scale of her mistake began to dawn on her. The ground was crumbling beneath her feet. I don't understand what's happening," she stammered to no one in particular. That's when Imani Vance picked up her business card. She didn't hold it up defiantly. She simply turned it over in her fingers and held it where everyone could see, The revelation wasn't just a plot twist. It was a paradigm shift that would shatter everything they thought they knew about power. 5 minutes past scheduled takeoff. The business card was simple, elegant, understated, and absolutely devastating. The black carbon fiber was embossed with fine gold lettering. Dr. Imani Vance, founder and Chief Executive Officer, Vanguard Innovations, Chad, the businessman in 1C, finally got his camera to focus. He read the card aloud for his breathless live stream audience. Vanguard Innovations, Chief Executive Officer. His voice trailed off into a choked whisper as the impossible implication slammed into him. His chat feed instantly devolved into pure chaos. Vanguard Innovations? They make the guidance systems for the entire Stratos fleet. OMG, the AI navigation software. She owns the tech that flies this plane. Oh, snap. Tiff is so fired. Captain Rivera stood frozen, the blood draining from his face. Any pilot with more than a year of experience knew the name Vanguard Innovations. They weren't just a vendor. They were a foundational partner, the invisible intelligence that powered the entire airline's modern fleet. Their predictive maintenance software, their automated navigation systems, their in-flight network security. It was all Vanguard. Vanguard was the ghost in the machine, and he had just allowed his crew to attempt to forcibly remove the ghost's creator. "Ma'am," he began again, his voice cracking. "I had no idea." "Clearly," Imani replied, the word landing with surgical precision. She picked up her phone and opened a highly specialized app, displaying a complex diagnostic screen filled with real-time data from the very aircraft they were sitting on. This particular aircraft, tail number N915SA, is currently operating under a 15-year exclusive technology and maintenance contract with Vanguard Innovations. Contract value approximately $4.3 million. Annually. For this plane alone. Sophia, in 3B, the VC analyst, buried her face in her hands. She had just sat silently and watched a flight attendant humiliate one of the most powerful and reclusive tech titans in Silicon Valley. A woman who was a legend in her industry. A woman her firm had been desperately trying to get a meeting with for 3 years. Tiffany's live stream, now with over 750 viewers, was still broadcasting, but her confident narration had been replaced by the sound of her own ragged, panicked breathing. She stared at the business card as if it were a venomous snake. This has to be a fake, a really good fake. Anyone can print a business card," she pleaded, her voice a desperate squeak. "Officer Davies," Imani said, turning her attention to the security officer. "Would you like me to make a call to Vanguard's 24-hour Global Operations Center? I can have them remotely run a full diagnostic on this plane's avionics from my phone and confirm my identity via a secure voice print match. Or would you prefer to just take Captain Rivera's word for it?" Davies looked from Imani's impossibly calm face to Captain Rivera's mask of sheer terror. He looked at Jenkins, who looked like he was about to vomit. In his 20 years of airport security, his entire world had been built on a simple hierarchy of authority. But in this moment, all the lines of power had become tangled into an impossible knot. "Captain, what are your instructions, sir?" Rivera was performing a frantic, high-speed calculation in his head. If this woman was who she said she was, this incident was not a career ender. It was an airline ender. It could trigger contract breaches that could bankrupt the company. But the faintest whisper of a possibility remained. What if it was an impossibly elaborate, sophisticated con? "Ma'am," Rivera said, forcing professionalism back into his voice. "Given the extraordinary nature of this claim, I must verify this information through our airline's official corporate channels." Imani nodded approvingly. "Of course, Captain. Professional verification is always the most appropriate course of action." Her composure was magnificent, She was teaching them how to handle the crisis she was creating for them. "While you do that," she added, "perhaps it would be useful for you to understand that this entire incident has been witnessed and documented by—" She paused and gestured around the cabin at the still recording phones. "What appears to be at least 1,000 individuals across multiple social media platforms, with the viewership growing exponentially by the second." Chad's video was no longer just an X post. It had exploded. Verified aviation journalists, tech bloggers, and airline executives were now sharing the footage, adding their own commentary. The name Imani Vance was spreading like wildfire. Holy shit! If that's really Imani Vance, Stratus Air is about to experience a day of reckoning of biblical proportions. A prominent tech journalist had posted. Another comment from a verified commercial pilot read, "Vanguard owns the brains of half the planes I fly. This is a 5-alarm corporate fire, 7 minutes past scheduled takeoff." Jenkins, the manager, finally found his voice, though it was brittle and weak. "Captain, even if this claim is legitimate, it doesn't excuse the passenger's initial non-compliance with standard safety and crew instructions." Imani slowly turned her head and fixed her gaze on Jenkins. It was like being pinned by a laser. "Mr. Jenkins, let me be exceptionally clear about what actually transpired here, so there is no ambiguity for your official report. Your flight attendant, Ms. Miller, made a series of demonstrably false accusations regarding the validity of my ticket. She publicly implied I had presented a fraudulent federal identification document, and she willfully and deliberately created a hostile and discriminatory environment based solely and exclusively on her assumptions about my race, my gender, and my economic status." She paused, letting the crushing weight of those legally loaded words settle over the dead silent cabin. "All of this," she continued, her voice as sharp and clean as a surgeon's scalpel, "occurred while I was lawfully and peacefully occupying a seat I had properly and legally purchased, on an aircraft that is only capable of flying because of the proprietary technology that my company owns, licenses, and maintains for your airline." The silence in the cabin was now absolute. The only sound was the frantic tapping of Captain Rivera's thumbs on his phone as he messaged the airline's Emergency Operations Center. "Code Black. Passenger incident. VIP verification required. Dr. Imani Vance, Vanguard Innovations. Immediate executive patch-through needed. This is not a drill." While he waited, Imani continued her masterclass in controlled deconstruction. "Mr. Jenkins, according to the Stratus Air Passenger Service Manual, Section 14, Subsection B, which, given our extensive and multi-billion-dollar business relationship, I have had my legal team review thoroughly. Crew members are required to discreetly verify any passenger documentation concerns through the official electronic manifest before making any public accusations of fraud. Was that protocol followed in my case?" Jenkins opened his mouth, a pathetic goldfish gasp, then closed it. The manual was crystal clear. Everyone in the industry knew the protocol, and everyone in the cabin knew, without a shadow of a doubt, that it had not been followed. "Furthermore," Imani went on, consulting a file on her phone, "your company's employee social media policy, which was just updated 3 months ago following that incident in Denver, explicitly prohibits staff members from live streaming any passenger interactions, under any circumstances, without the explicit written consent of all parties involved. Ms. Miller, your employee, has been broadcasting this entire humiliating ordeal to hundreds of viewers in a direct and flagrant violation of both your own company policy and, potentially, federal wiretapping laws." Tiffany's face, which had been pale, now turned a ghastly shade of gray. She fumbled with her phone, frantically trying to end the live stream, which now had 812 people watching her career implode in real time. She stabbed at the screen, but her hands were shaking too violently. Captain Rivera's phone buzzed. The call from headquarters was coming through. Yes, this is Captain Rivera, employee number 77441, aboard Flight 714, aircraft N915SA at SFO. I require immediate and definitive verification on the identity of Dr. Imani Vance, CEO of Vanguard Innovations. There was a pause. Yes, I will hold. I need confirmation at the highest level. Chad, in 1C, whispered to his camera, his voice full of awe. Ladies and gentlemen, I think we have just witnessed what may become the single most expensive act of customer service discrimination in the history of American aviation. This is insane. His live stream chat was moving too fast to read. The comments were no longer from trolls, but from verified accounts. Lawyers, journalists, tech executives, all trying to grasp the scale of the catastrophe they were witnessing. 9 minutes past scheduled takeoff. A voice crackled from Captain Rivera's phone, loud and clear enough for the first 3 rows to hear. It was the voice of a man who had been pulled out of a very important meeting and was not happy about it. Captain, this is Frank Garrison, Executive Vice President of North American Operations. I can confirm that Dr. Vance is indeed the founder and CEO of Vanguard Innovations. She is, without question, one of our single most important strategic partners. She is en route to JFK for our quarterly Technology and Integration Summit. Let me be absolutely clear. She is to be considered a VVIP with ultimate priority. Is there a problem with her flight? Rivera closed his eyes and took a long, slow breath, a man steadying himself before walking off a cliff. No problem, sir. Just a routine passenger verification. Thank you for your assistance. He hung up the phone and looked at Imani, his eyes a swirling mix of profound respect and barely contained terror. Dr. Vance, he said, his voice now hushed with deference. On behalf of Stratus Air, from the board of directors down to this flight crew, I offer our most sincere, absolute, and unreserved apologies for what has transpired here. This should never, under any circumstances, have been allowed to happen. But Imani Vance was not done, not by a long shot. The apology was merely the opening move in a much larger game. She opened another app on her phone. This one was a sophisticated dashboard of real-time social media analytics, public relations metrics, and financial data. Captain, while I appreciate the sentiment, we need to address the tangible consequences. This incident has now been viewed over 5,000 times across at least 4 social media platforms in just the last 15 minutes. The hashtag #FrogPintshow, Stratos Air discrimination, is now the #1 trend in the San Francisco Bay Area and is beginning to trend in New York and Los Angeles. She turned the screen so Rivera could see the horrifying data visualizations. Graphs showed the viral spread of the story across the globe. Sentiment analysis showed that over 90% of mentions were overwhelmingly negative. My company's public relations team has been monitoring and archiving every post, every video, and every live stream for our legal records. The financial impact is already measurable, Captain, and it is accelerating. She swiped to another screen. It was a live stock ticker. Your parent company, Global Wings Alliance, has dropped 1.9% in the last 10 minutes. That's a market cap loss of approximately $92 million, and counting. The ethics professor in 4C slowly sank back into his seat, shaking his head in sheer, unadulterated awe. He quietly spoke into his own phone. Martha, you are not going to believe the masterclass in corporate karma I have just witnessed. It is the most beautiful thing I have ever seen. Eleanor, the elderly woman who had been so certain of her judgment just minutes before, was now staring intently at her own hands in her lap, her face beet red, refusing to make eye contact with anyone. 11 minutes past scheduled takeoff. Imani's phone buzzed with an incoming call, the one she had been waiting for. She answered it immediately. Dr. Vance speaking. A pause. Yes, Benjamin. I am fully aware of the situation. No, I am still physically on the aircraft. The entire incident has been recorded from multiple angles by myself and several other passengers. Another pause. Correct. I will need a comprehensive report detailing our total contractual exposure with Stratus Air and its parent company on my desk by morning. Also, please have the legal team prepare a full analysis of our contract's material breach and corporate malfeasance termination clauses. Thank you. She ended the call and looked directly at Captain Rivera, her gaze steady and unwavering. That was my chief strategy officer. He sits on several of your parent company's advisory boards. Captain, Vanguard Innovations currently has active contracts worth over $1.2 billion annually with Stratus Air. We provide the core operating systems for 78 of your 212 aircraft. That represents approximately 37% of your total operational capacity. The numbers, delivered with such calm, devastating precision, landed on Captain Rivera like body blows. Additionally, she continued, we hold the exclusive maintenance contracts for your entire Airbus fleet, and my team is currently in the final stages of negotiating a $2 billion fleet-wide technology upgrade for the next fiscal year. Or rather, we were. Jenkins looked like he might actually collapse. The scale of the fallout was beyond anything he could have comprehended. His mind simply couldn't process the sheer number of zeros involved. Dr. Vance, please, just tell us how we can resolve this, he pleaded. But Imani Vance had one final revelation. One more card to play that would completely and irrevocably shatter their understanding of the power dynamics at play. She reached into her Hermes handbag. She pulled out a second business card holder. This one was different. Polished mahogany. It was older, more dignified. She slid out a single card, thicker than the last, printed on heavy cream-colored stock. Imani Vance, Managing Partner, Transportation and Infrastructure Fund, Cyprus Capital Group. Captain, she said, her voice dropping again into that chillingly quiet register. There is something else you and Mr. Garrison should probably know. Vanguard Innovations isn't my only business interest in the commercial aviation industry. She opened a financial portfolio app on her phone. The screen lit up with a dizzying array of stocks, bonds, and private equity holdings. Cyprus Capital Group, the private equity firm I founded 15 years ago, before I even started Vanguard, currently holds an 11.8% equity stake in your parent company, Global Wings Alliance. As of this morning, we are the second largest institutional shareholder. The words dropped into the cabin's silent atmosphere like a depth charge, the shockwave expanding outwards, stunning everyone into absolute stillness. Chad's livestream chat simply ceased to exist. It became a frantic, unreadable blur of shocked emojis and all-caps disbelief. She owns the airline? This can't be real. That flight attendant just tried to kick her own boss's boss off the plane. Rip Tiffany Miller. Jenkins finally made a small, choking sound and swayed on his feet. Tiffany's phone slipped from her nerveless fingers and clattered to the floor, her live stream finally, mercifully, ending. Captain Javier Rivera stared at Imani Vance, the woman in Seat 2A, the tech titan, the airline owner, in complete, stunned, reverent silence for a full 10 seconds. Dr. Vance, he finally managed to say, his voice nothing more than a ragged whisper. What would you like us to do? Imani Vance, founder of Vanguard Innovations, managing partner of Cyprus Capital Group, and part owner of the very airline whose employees had just systematically and publicly humiliated her, smiled. It was the first genuine smile she had shown since boarding the aircraft. It was beautiful, and it was terrifying. Captain, she said, I think it's time for some immediate and profound corporate accountability. The real reckoning had just begun. 13 minutes past scheduled takeoff. Imani navigated to a legal document app on her phone, the screen glowing in the hushed cabin. "Captain Rivera," she began, her tone now that of a CEO leading a hostile takeover. "Before we can even begin to discuss a resolution, let me familiarize you with the relevant contractual covenants that are now in effect." She displayed a complex PDF document. "This is the Vanguard Innovations Standard Master Services Agreement, Section 32, Subsection C, Discrimination and Hostile Environment Provisions. It clearly states that any client found to be engaging in or allowing its employees to engage in discriminatory practices against any protected class while operating Vanguard-licensed technology may be subject to immediate contract review, penalty clauses, and potential termination for cause." Rivera leaned in, his eyes scanning the dense legalese, his face growing paler with every word. "Furthermore," Imani continued, seamlessly scrolling to another document, "the Cypress Capital Group's shareholder agreement with Global Wings Alliance includes mandatory compliance standards for diversity, equity, and inclusion, as per Addendum 7. Any significant violation, particularly one that generates negative publicity and material financial loss, can trigger an emergency board meeting and a formal review of the executive leadership's fitness to govern." In Chad's livestream chat, which he had restarted to a new, larger audience, aviation lawyers were already breaking down the legal Armageddon that was unfolding. One verified attorney commented, "These aren't boilerplate clauses. She wrote the rules of the game, and she's holding all the cards. Stratus Air isn't in a negotiation. They're in a surrender ceremony." Jenkins, desperate to find some semblance of relevance, stammered, "Dr. Vance, surely we can resolve this through the airline's internal channels without involving shareholder agreements and contract law." Imani's gaze shifted back to him, cool and dismissive. "Mr. Jenkins, the time for internal channels passed the moment your employee chose public humiliation over professional protocol. This incident has now achieved a viral velocity that is beyond your control." She opened her social media analytics app again. Current metrics: over 9,000 unique views across platforms, 452 retweets and shares. The hashtag #Stratus Air Discrimination is now the third most used tag in the entire United States travel sector for the last hour. Sophia, the VC analyst in 3B, was now quietly live streaming to her own network of tech professionals and investors, providing a running commentary in both English and Spanish, explaining the sheer magnitude of who Dr. Vance was. Her small stream had ballooned to over 300 viewers, most of them C-suite executives and venture capitalists who were now furiously messaging their own contacts at Stratus Air, demanding answers. The corporate firestorm was spreading. "Additionally," Imani said, her voice a relentless tide, "I have now received 23 phone calls in the past 10 minutes. They are from my board members, my general counsel, fellow institutional investors, and reporters from the Wall Street Journal and Bloomberg. Mr. Jenkins, you are no longer dealing with a passenger service complaint. You are dealing with a full-blown corporate governance crisis." Captain Rivera pulled out his own phone, his face grim. "Dr. Vance, with your permission, may I contact my executive vice president directly to discuss immediate remediation options?" "Permission granted, Captain," Imani replied, "but I want you, and him, to understand the full scope of what you're dealing with here." She toggled to another screen showing a list of logos. "Vanguard has technology partnerships with 3 of your largest airline competitors. If what I experienced today is reflective of Stratus Air's underlying corporate culture, then I have a fiduciary duty to my own company to reassess whether our continued business relationship aligns with Vanguard's core values of equity and respect." The threat was clear, precise, and nuclear. Losing Vanguard Innovations as a partner would not just be embarrassing, It would ground their most advanced aircraft and cripple their operations within weeks. Rivera dialed his emergency management line. His voice was tense. "This is Captain Rivera on Flight 714. I need an immediate and secure patch-through to Executive Vice President Frank Garrison." "No, I cannot wait." "Yes, it's beyond urgent. Code Black." While he waited for the call to connect, Imani did something remarkable. She turned her attention away from the crew and addressed the other passengers. "Ladies and gentlemen, I sincerely apologize for this extended delay. Please know that my intention is to ensure this situation is resolved in a way that ensures no other traveler ever has to experience this, and that proper accountability is established." The ethics professor in 4C spoke up immediately. "Dr. Vance, please do not apologize. Thank you for handling this with such profound strength and dignity. Many of us in this cabin have been through similar, smaller indignities, but we lacked the resources and the power to demand this kind of systemic response." Several other passengers, including the lawyer in 3A and even a few of the silent ones, nodded in solemn agreement. 15 minutes past scheduled takeoff. Rivera's call connected. Frank Garrison's voice came through, tinny and stressed. "Rivera, what in God's name is happening on your plane? My phone is blowing up." "Sir, we have an active passenger discrimination incident. The passenger is Dr. Imani Vance of Vanguard Innovations." The silence on the other end of the line was so complete, so profound, it seemed to suck the air out of the cabin. It lasted 5 full seconds. "Did you just say Imani Vance? The Imani Vance?" "Yes, sir. She was subjected to flagrantly discriminatory treatment by one of our flight attendants, the manager on duty, and airport security. The entire incident has been live-streamed and recorded by multiple passengers and is going viral as we speak." A string of curses echoed faintly from the phone. Then Rivera looked at Imani, who simply gestured for him to put the call on speakerphone. "Director Garrison," Imani's voice cut through, crisp and clear. "This is Dr. Vance. The incident I have just endured on your aircraft involved public accusations of ticket fraud, unsubstantiated suggestions that I had forged federal documents, and a deliberate, humiliating attempt to physically remove me from an aircraft whose safe operation is entirely dependent on technology my company provides to your airline." Garrison's voice was now tight with controlled panic. "Dr. Vance, on behalf of the entire executive leadership team of Stratosair and Global Wings Alliance, I offer our most profound and humble apologies. This is utterly, completely unacceptable. Director Garrison, I appreciate your rapid response. However, apologies are insufficient. We need to discuss immediate, concrete, and binding corrective actions, as well as long-term, verifiable systemic changes." Imani opened a notes app on her phone. She was no longer just a passenger. She was an auditor, a reformer, and a judge, all rolled into one. "I am proposing 3 immediate actions, to be completed before this aircraft leaves the gate. First, the immediate termination of the employment of the flight attendant who initiated this discriminatory treatment and so brazenly violated your social media policies. Second, the immediate suspension, pending a full investigation, of the manager who escalated this situation without following a single verification protocol. And third, a public written apology issued via Stratosair's official social media channels, acknowledging the discriminatory nature of this incident, to be posted within the next 30 minutes. The response from the phone was instantaneous. "Done," Garrison said. "Consider all 3 actions implemented within the hour. Tell me what else you need, Doctor." But Imani was just getting started. This was never about revenge. It was about revolution. Additionally, I am requiring systemic changes to prevent any future incidents of this nature. First, the immediate implementation of mandatory, quarterly, unconscious bias and de-escalation training for all 15,000 of your customer-facing employees. Second, a complete overhaul of your passenger verification and dispute procedures to remove employee discretion and prevent discriminatory profiling. Third, the establishment of a new independent real-time incident reporting system that goes directly to an executive-level civilian review board. The entire cabin was now a silent lecture hall, witnessing a live negotiation that would redefine an entire industry's approach to customer service. Tiffany Miller, who had been standing near the galley, paralyzed with fear, finally broke. "This is ridiculous. I was just doing my job. That could have been anyone trying to scam their way on board." The entire cabin turned to stare at her, Captain Rivera's face contorted in a mask of pure horror at her utter lack of self-awareness. Imani looked at Tiffany, not with anger, but with a kind of sad, clinical disappointment. "Ms. Miller, doing your job does not include making baseless assumptions founded on racial stereotypes. It does not include creating a public spectacle for social media clout. And it does not include violating your own company's policies and federal anti-discrimination laws. Your actions were not a mistake. They were a choice." Garrison's voice shot through the speakerphone, sharp as a rifle crack. "Ms. Miller, you are terminated, effective immediately. Do not speak another word. Security will escort you from the aircraft you have so profoundly disgraced." The finality of it hit the cabin like a physical blow. Tiffany's face finally crumpled, the arrogant mask dissolving into a mess of shock and belated regret. Her career was over, and she had broadcast its demise to the world. 17 minutes past scheduled takeoff. "Dr. Vance," Garrison continued, his voice now pleading, "please tell me what more we can do to repair this relationship and restore your confidence in Stratus Air." Imani consulted her phone again. "Director Garrison, your company has lost approximately $140 million in shareholder value in the last 20 minutes. The long-term reputational damage is, as of now, incalculable." She showed her screen to Rivera again. Bloomberg and Reuters had both picked up the story. "What would you consider appropriate compensation, Dr. Vance? Name your price." Imani let out a short, sharp breath, almost a laugh. "I do not want your money, Director Garrison. I have plenty of my own. I want meaningful, lasting, systemic change. I want to ensure this never, ever happens again to another passenger, especially one who doesn't have my resources, my platform, and my leverage to fight back." The sheer power of that statement, the profound morality of it, resonated through the cabin. This wasn't about personal vengeance. It was about institutional justice. "I want Stratos Air," Imani declared, "to become a national model for how discrimination incidents are not only handled but prevented. I want your company to lead the entire industry in creating a genuinely safe and inclusive travel experience for every single person who steps on one of your planes." There was a long pause on the other end of the phone. When Garrison spoke again, his voice was different, humbled. "Dr. Vance," he said quietly, We commit to implementing every single change you have outlined. Our General Counsel will have a draft of a new comprehensive discrimination prevention plan on your desk within 48 hours for your review and approval." Imani nodded, a flicker of satisfaction in her eyes. "I will have my legal team review your proposal. If the changes are substantive, verifiable, and implemented with a genuine commitment from the top down, Vanguard Innovations will continue our partnership. And we will even consider accelerating the negotiations for the fleet-wide technology upgrade." It was masterful. The carrot and the stick, perfectly applied. "However," she added, one final turn of the screw, "if there is any backsliding, any sign that these changes are merely cosmetic, or if another incident like this occurs anywhere in your global system, Cyprus Capital Group will immediately exercise its full shareholder rights to call for an emergency vote of no confidence in the current executive leadership." Frank Garrison understood perfectly. The threat was not just to his airline's contracts, but to his own job. "Dr. Vance, you have my personal solemn guarantee that this will never, ever happen again." Captain Rivera let out a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding for 20 minutes. For the first time, a sliver of relief crossed his face. "Dr. Vance, are we cleared for departure? You have that meeting in New York." Imani looked at him and smiled. It was that same small, terrifyingly powerful smile. "Almost, Captain. I believe we are almost ready. But first, I think these passengers who have been witness to all of this deserve an explanation and an invitation." She was about to transform this moment of personal vindication into a powerful, teachable moment for every single person on that plane, turning a crisis into a crusade. 19 minutes past scheduled takeoff. Captain Rivera straightened his uniform, turned, and addressed the entire cabin. His voice was no longer that of a pilot, but of a humbled leader. "Ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of Stratos Air, I want to personally and publicly apologize for the deplorable incident you have all just witnessed. What happened to Dr. Vance was completely and utterly unacceptable. It does not represent our values, and it represents a profound failure of our systems and our people." He paused, making eye contact with passenger after passenger, before his gaze settled on Imani. "Dr. Vance has shown us all remarkable grace and strength under unimaginable pressure, and because of her principled stand today, she is helping us ensure that no other passenger, ever, experiences this kind of treatment on our airline again." A strange thing happened. A single passenger began to clap. It was the ethics professor in 4C. Then Sophia, the VC analyst in 3B, joined in. Then the lawyer in 3A. Within seconds, the entire first-class cabin and several rows of coach had broken into a spontaneous, sustained round of applause. Even Eleanor, the judgmental woman from 1D, was clapping, tears welling in her eyes. Imani rose from her seat and addressed the cabin. "Thank you all," she said, her voice filled with a quiet strength that commanded attention. "Thank you for witnessing this, but I need you to understand that this was never just about me or my seat. This was about every single person who has ever been made to feel small while traveling. Every person who has faced prejudice and discrimination, who didn't have the contracts and the capital to fight back, who was forced to swallow unfair treatment because they felt isolated and powerless." She paused, letting her words sink in. The changes that have been implemented today, the real-time reporting, the mandatory bias training, the executive accountability, these aren't just corporate policies. They are a promise from this airline to every one of you, and every passenger who will follow, that you will be treated with dignity and respect. Officer Davies, who had remained silent and professional throughout the ordeal, approached Imani. "Dr. Vance, I need to apologize for my role in this. I was following a procedure, but I should have asked more questions. I should have assessed the situation myself instead of just taking the flight attendant's word for it." Imani looked at him, not with judgment, but with empathy. "Officer Davies, you were acting based on the training and protocols you were given. The system failed you just as it failed me. That's what we are going to fix today. Better systems, better protocols, better training, so that good people like you are never put in that position again." She had instantly transformed a personal apology into a lesson on institutional improvement, absolving his guilt while reinforcing the need for systemic change. 21 minutes past scheduled takeoff. A voice came over the PA system. It was Sarah, the third flight attendant. "Ladies and gentlemen, we have just received a system-wide communication from Stratos Air headquarters. Effective immediately, our airline is implementing new passenger verification procedures. Any dispute over seating or documentation will now require a 2-person supervisor review and full electronic verification before any action is taken. We are also officially launching a new 24-hour passenger advocacy hotline for the immediate reporting of any and all discrimination incidents. The number is being pushed to your seatback screens now. Chad, the businessman who had started the viral firestorm, spoke up, his voice uncharacteristically sheepish. Dr. Vance, I owe you an apology. I was too quick to judge and even quicker to hit record. I've learned something really important today about my own biases and my privilege. Imani nodded at him. Thank you for that acknowledgement. It takes strength to admit that. But more importantly, thank you for documenting this incident. Your video, however you intended it, became undeniable proof. It will now become part of the training materials that will help thousands of other employees learn how to recognize and prevent discrimination. In a moment of brilliant jujitsu, she had transformed his tool of shame into a tool for education. 23 minutes past scheduled takeoff. Director Garrison's voice came over the captain's speaker one last time. Dr. Vance, our executive team and general counsel have already drafted an initial framework for the discrimination prevention plan. We are emailing it to you now for your initial review. Imani's phone chimed with a secure, encrypted document. She opened the 12-page PDF, her eyes scanning the complex legal language and policy proposals with the speed and precision of a woman who reviewed $100 million term sheets over breakfast. Director Garrison, this is a comprehensive and impressive start, she said, her voice audible throughout the quiet cabin. I am particularly impressed with the proposal for a passenger-led diversity and inclusion advisory board. My team will review the full document and provide our feedback, but this demonstrates a serious commitment to meaningful, systemic change. She looked around the cabin at all the faces, black, white, brown, young, old, all watching her, united by this extraordinary experience. Ladies and gentlemen, what you've witnessed today isn't just about a conflict being resolved. This is how powerful institutions can be forced to evolve when they are held accountable by the very people they serve. 25 minutes past scheduled takeoff. As the aircraft finally pushed back from the gate and began its slow, majestic taxi to the runway, Imani Vance settled back into Seat 2A, the seat she had rightfully and legally occupied from the very beginning. Her Hermes bag sat beside her, her Patek Philippe watch caught the morning light, and her business cards were safely tucked away. The plane roared down the runway and lifted gracefully into the California sky. It was carrying more than just passengers to their destinations. It was carrying forward a new, higher standard for dignity, respect, and accountability in air travel. And Dr. Imani Vance, the quiet woman in seat 2A, had just proven that you don't have to raise your voice to change the world. Sometimes, all you have to do is hold your ground, know your power, and refuse to be moved. If her story moved you, then it's your turn to act. You have a voice, you have a platform, right here, right now. In the comments below, share a time you witnessed an injustice, big or small, and what you did, or what you wish you had done. Let's learn from each other. And if you haven't already, please hit that subscribe button and share this video. By sending this story out into the world, you become part of the change Dr. Vance started. Let's make sure these stories, these moments of quiet power and dignified triumph, are heard everywhere. Because sometimes the most powerful revolution begins with a single quiet no. Remember, you don't need to raise your voice to raise the standard, but you do need to raise your expectations and demand that the world rise to meet you. Until next time, stay strong,